Hello, I am Leslie McGee with the Adult Protective Services Technical Assistance Resource Center, the APS TARC. Welcome to our presentation, Memorandums of Understanding, MOUs, where tribal sovereignty meets elder protection. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I just want to clarify that this webinar was created by the APS TARC, administered by WRMA Incorporated under contract number 140D0424F1178 from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Community Living, Administration on Aging. The views expressed in this webinar do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of the Administration for Community Living or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, The models and information provided during this webinar do not serve as official guidance to comply with any part of the APS final rule. All information is provided for informational purposes only. Next slide, please. This presentation is also being hosted by the APS TARC. Our mission is to enhance the effectiveness of APS programs by supporting our partners' use of data and analytics, applying research and evaluation to practice, encouraging encouraging the use of innovative practices and strategies, and providing APS programs with individualized technical assistance. Today's presentation is being recorded without a live audience. Should you have any questions after viewing this recording, please reach out to the APS TARC team using the contact information provided at the end of the presentation. We will be happy to discuss ways that we can assist you, as well as any questions you may have on the presentation. Next slide, please. Our presenters today are Peggy Jo Archer, Margaret Carson, and Judith Kozlowski from the International Association for Indigenous Aging, or IA². They may be joined briefly by their colleague Ron Epps. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Peggy Jo. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you guys for spending time with us today to talk about the importance of an MOU and working collaborative with tribal nations. My name is Peggy Jo. I'm the director of the Elder Justice Projects at IA², which stands for the International Association for Indigenous Aging. Under my leadership, we focus on addressing elder abuse in Indian country. We operate the Native American Elder Justice Initiative, which you will hear us refer to as NAEJI. That is through a cooperative agreement with ACL. And through that cooperative agreement, we provide technical assistance to tribal nations to strengthen or support their elder justice work. And that can look very different, as there's 574 federally recognized tribes, and each one of those have their own law and order and the way that they do their elder protection. And so we're really excited to be here with you today to talk about this. I'm going to pass it over to Margaret Carson, and then she'll pass it over to Judith to do their introductions.
Hello, I'm Margaret Carson. I'm an Elder Justice Advisor with IA². I'm also the Program Manager of the Muckleshoot Tribe's Adult Protective Services Program. I run the APS program. I've worked with elders for over 40 years. I am a geriatric mental health specialist and a licensed therapist and have many, many years of experience of working in adult protective services. Judith?
Oops.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having us. My name is Judith Kozlowski. I'm also an Elder Justice Advisor for IA². I've worked in elder justice issues for several decades, and right now I am working with IA² to build their capacity when we're looking at issues particularly around jurisdictional challenges, of which this is one we'll talk about today. I have a background as a federal and state prosecutor. I've also done securities regulation, and I worked at ACL as a National Elder Justice Advisor for the Assistant Secretary. I have also founded the CFPB's Office for the Financial Protection of Older Americans. My area specialty tends to be a financial exploitation of older adults, but I do whatever we need to at IA². Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Next slide, please. Today's learning objectives, we will understand how the issue of tribal sovereignty impacts APS work. We'll identify important considerations in creating cooperative agreements with tribes, and we'll talk a little bit about the NAEJI resources. Next slide. Today, we will really talk about how tribal nations are sovereign governments within their own inherent authority to protect their elders. And so in this presentation, like I said a few minutes ago, you're going to hear many different examples or diverse ways that elder protection can be done and that how it can be put into a memorandum of understanding. As we know, elder abuse often requires a coordinated response through federal systems, state systems, county systems, and tribal systems. But we know that that has to be done through some kind of formal agreement, like a memorandum of understanding or MOA, depending on what the language that you use in your community. It's really important to have those cooperative agreements so that you can meet your goals and objectives, and so that elders, especially tribal elders, are not being left with no services. We know that memorandums are that framework to address sovereignty and to work within sovereignty, and then work within the state statutes, county sanctions that all of the adult protective services professionals have to work within. And then we know that when it's done well, that the MOU is written well, it's worked well, people see success, elders are connected to resources, and they are, justice is sought, and dignity is restored back to the elder. So we feel that this topic was really important to bring to you, because as we have been in the field, we work in many different tribal nations with many county and state and federal partners. And one of the biggest things that we hear is that there are MOUs, and when there are MOUs, that they're not workable. Maybe the staff isn't being trained on those MOUs. So we went right to work. We said, okay, maybe we can develop a template MOU that would help facilitate that conversation between the state and the tribes, so that we can make a coordinated response to addressing elder abuse. So today's objective will set out clear terms of what should be, what government bodies should be addressed in these MOUs, how to cooperate within everybody's roles and responsibilities, really talking a lot about sovereignty for each party, because that looks different if you're a tribe from a PL 280 state, or if there are special jurisdictions that apply. And again, that will have to be on each one of you that is working in a different state, in a different county, and with a different tribe to understand those special jurisdictions. And then each side of the agreement has duties and has responsibilities and obligations. And we know that that poses some difficulties because there's state sanctions, the state laws, the county or the city ordinance, depending on what it is, can impact the response. But we want to make sure that all of that can be captured within a formal agreement. Next slide. Important introductory points. We know that sovereignty is a really big thing that has to be discussed at the beginning of any partnership with tribal nations. We often see that many partners go into or attempt to go into partnerships with tribal nations and don't even understand what sovereignty is, don't understand the tribal history and the tribal background, and maybe even the culture. And then also understanding the purpose of the MOU. What is it the purpose served for? What are the forms of abuse? Because often the state law will dictate what abuse is and what criteria it meets to for where the law applies. But in tribal nations, they might have spiritual abuse, and we often don't, hardly ever, maybe never, see spiritual abuse applied in state court, state law, but sometimes you will see that in tribal code law and their law and order. And so it's really important to understand why and what the purpose is and what that scope of work could look like. And then how the mutual agreement will operate. And something that we've also seen is that when we're looking at sovereignty and mutual agreements and how they operate, these have to be workable documents. They can't just be something that is created and never looked at it again, because things change, laws change, resources change. And so it's really important to always look at how these mutual agreements are operating and do they need to be revised. Next slide. All right, I will pass this over to Judith.
Oh, Whoops. Ah, I thought we were going to go to Margaret on these next few slides.
Okay, Margaret.
Yes, we'll start by defining on who does what. But one thing I wanted to preface that with is when you're doing an MOU, a tribal MOU, it's really important from the very beginning to get the cooperation and the feedback of the whoever's going to be signing or approving the MOU. If you start out with just say like program manager to program manager and you don't include whoever's going to be signing it, tribal council or elders committee or law and order committee or whatever the tribe defines, then you may get too far in the agreement and then not be able to negotiate terms that you want to because you'll want to get the tribal leadership to be involved in the agreement. So first of all, you define who does what. You need to include the purpose of the cooperation, the reason why the MOU is being done, how it's going to work, and how to best share the information. Next slide. And then there's going to need to be a process for reviews and modifications. Typically in MOUs, this will be reviewed every 6 months or every year, or it could even be that you bring it back for negotiation if there's a change or an issue. So the frequency of review needs to be included. There needs to be concluded on how to incorporate the modifications. And then typically in our sample MOU, we use an addendum for the modifications.
So
Next
Margaret,
slide.
just one
Go
thing,
ahead.
to going back to one of the points that you made earlier, I think it's really important for APS when working with tribal nations to understand the mechanism within the tribal nation for tribal buy-in and approval of going forward with a document like this. One of the things that Margaret mentioned is about tribal council. Sometimes, in some circumstances, it is important for the tribe to get through a tribal resolution approval from a tribal council to go forward to even draft this document. So it's incredibly important for APS to recognize the steps that a tribe may need to take prior to sitting down to actually draft the document, because that all reflects, again, tribal history and tribal culture with regard to working with other individuals outside the tribe. Thank you.
And also it may be that for instance, like in the Muckleshoot tribe, a program manager and a program manager would not negotiate a document. It would be the it would be tribal council or elders committee that would sign off on the document and review it. But also on the state side or the other side is that we wouldn't want to negotiate with a program manager. We would want to negotiate with a director or possibly even the head of, not just the head of a department, but the head of a whole, like the secretary of DSHS, for instance, would be the signing person rather than just being a program manager. So it's important before you begin a document is to figure out who's going to be signing it and who's going to be approving it, so there's not going to be any offense later on in the process. Next slide. And then for the reviews and modifications, policies and procedures need to be identified in the document itself. Who's going to be making referrals to and from are there going to be continuing case consultations? For instance, in our own MOUs that we have, I would want not only for it to be identified that that the the client be referred, but we would also want to have, because we do restorative justice here, we would want for it to be included that the wrongdoer be involved or that family members be involved. And so I would want to be notified if the state or another party had had interaction with those individuals, because we would want to include them in our process. Also in continuing case consultations, who's going to be involved in that, incorporation of supportive tribal and state services, how the referrals are going to be made. The tribal services are going to be different than state services. We might have our own behavioral health program. We might have our own tribal services and ways of making the referrals, and then also include the types of restorative justice practices that the tribe uses and the remedies, and also who we would contact to make the referrals. Would we involve the prosecutor's office? Would we include the police? And to just each tribe is going to be a bit different, but that needs to be included in the document. And then also the law enforcement piece, the further investigation for possible criminal charges, how to make a referral to law enforcement, and to draw some boundaries about what's appropriate for that.
So, Margaret, just to amplify some of the points that you've made, one of the things we've done in our in the template that we have put forward as an MOU, social services MOU between tribal nations and state APS, is to also continue to look at and incorporate in the very document both what the tribal approach would be for a particular issue and what the state approach is, so that both parties see in clear language in the MOU the different approaches that can be taken in any particular case. And in some matters, I know that Margaret, you've mentioned this several times, that the state would be talking to you about something and you would say, well, that's a good idea, thank you, but in our tribe we do it differently. It's part of that open communication that needs to take place, but it can be set in motion actually in the actual document that you're drafting, so that in specific areas there can be a discussion by paragraph in such and such tribe approaches this in a particular way, and it can be stated right in the MOU, which is a little bit different than many other MOUs, but really important in working with tribal nations, not only in this area, but other as well. So I think those are really important points to make as you're drafting your MOU.
Next slide. And then in the reviews and modifications, that tribes might also offer different services for counseling and treatment. For instance, we might include that the wrongdoer be getting counseling and treatment, and that would be a part of our restorative justice system. This could include mental health counseling, treatment for alcohol, substance abuse, gambling, family counseling, family tribal talking circles. We would also include our elder protection teams or other family meetings, and that we would involve the community in a way that outside systems would not. And then we would also have caregiver training and respite care. For instance, here we have a very robust 24/7 in-home program, so we would want to include them in our MOU. Every tribe is different, every tribe has different services, and so this would need to be included. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It needs to be an individual modification. That's the reason it's a template, rather than it being something that each tribe will have the same MOU. It was particularly designed to be something that could be modified, that would be relevant and appropriate for each tribe and each culture.
And incredibly important in drafting for tribal nations to understand that some of the outside counseling services, for example, that a state may have available would be included in here with the understanding that they are to be supportive of the tribal outline, so that in many cases, tribes do not have as robust systems as the Muckleshoot tribe does, for example, but would still be in need of supportive state services to enable the wrongdoer or the person who was wronged to receive mental health counseling or some sort of addiction counseling, whatever that may be, and also to offer support and to the tribe, essentially, for putting together whatever the talking circles would be, however the family counseling would go forward, and to support the restorative justice actions that a tribe is prepared to take under particular circumstances. And as we all know, anybody who's done any elder abuse work knows that every case is very different because of the individual family dynamics or the dynamics between the wrongdoer and the person who is harmed. So it's very important to keep these particular ideas in mind, that the state will be supportive of tribal work, but not necessarily dominate what those particular supportive services would be in any particular case.
Next slide. And Judith, I think you're taking the next section.
I think I am. Thank you very much, Margaret. So one of the things that I think we've mentioned a little bit, although perhaps not so directly, is the fact that when these the documents are drawn up, sometimes they are put into, as they say, old-fashioned ways, a file folder or a file drawer, and forgotten. And the modifications are not really addressed. I think one of the most important things in drafting MOUs, particularly between parties that may not work so closely or haven't in the past or want to enhance their services, is to figure out amount of time in which the document will be reviewed. Is it working? Is it not working? How often should we meet? What are the kinds of things we need to enhance? And question whether or not our policies and procedures clear enough. Does each party understand the duties and responsibilities it has within the way those are drafted? Do they need to be changed? Do some need to be dropped? Do new ones need to be added? All of that needs to go into a review and all the types of modifications that both sides may seek. But with the understanding, again, the recognition of tribal sovereignty is first and foremost, and any of the modifications need to be culturally sensitive to tribal needs, as well as understanding whatever the state dictates may be. One of the things that also comes up from time to time is, although we've done reviews and modifications, for whatever reasons, this agreement is not working. We've heard this from several different tribes, that there may be an MOU in place, but it isn't working, and nobody can figure out what to do, or nobody's interested in doing it one way or the other. But there also needs to be a section within the MOU itself for termination, for the possibility that this document is not the one they need, or that there is an agreement between the parties that they, for whatever reasons, are not finding it convenient to work together on this particular issue. So the reasons for termination may or may not be stated in the document. It can be just essentially kind of a mutual agreement, but there also needs to be an agreement about how that determination would take place, what would be the time limit for it, rather than just not showing up. For example, if there's an agreement to terminate the agreement, it would be within a certain period of time, sometimes 30 days, sometimes 60 days, or sometimes it can be a point where a tribal nation and state may get to the point where we're just feeling like this isn't working. We're not really ready to terminate at all, but they may set some sort of thing in motion, again, by an addendum to say, if you're hitting some sort of impasse, that you can say, we'll revisit this within 30, 60, 90 days, whatever time period the parties agreed to. Next slide, please. So even when we talk about the agreements, there are inevitably going to be gaps that are going to persist as the document moves forward. There are going to be things that happen because each case is different, and each case is a learning opportunity to see what could have been done better, what things are not in the agreement that should have been in the agreement, what things should be dropped because they're too cumbersome and we don't really need that. All of that needs to be part of the discussion as the cases go forward, and be able to identify what are the gaps that are going to be there. Sometimes the gaps are not necessarily what's in an agreement, but they're just misunderstandings of culture or history, or there is some other type of misunderstanding. Sometimes we have seen that when a tribe is, as part of its elder code, includes spiritual abuse as part of a type of elder abuse, that state agencies don't understand exactly what that means. That needs to be part of filling the gap, essentially, an understanding between two parties that this is an important piece of how tribes view elder abuse. It's really important for the states to understand what that is. Also, some of the challenges, sometimes we find that each party to the agreement is tripping over the other for one reason or another. People are, everybody thinks that they were supposed to be doing part A and nobody was doing part B. So the agreement should identify which party is responsible for what, or which party is responsible, and within each party, who in that group is going to be responsible for whatever issues come up. Again, this is a great opportunity to keep open communication so that you don't find yourself tripping over the other party and vice versa, to be able to say that we are going to work on this piece together, but on piece number 2, you can do this and I can do that, so that it's articulated and it's set forward. Nothing in any agreement is ever truly written in stone, because the world doesn't work like that. And these cases certainly are not going to be working like that. But I think as clearly as possible, it's important to identify the duties and responsibilities of each side, and within each side, the departments that are there. But the most important issue, and I can't say this enough, is to always understand that the issue of tribal sovereignty is first and foremost with tribes. In each one of these matters, in each one of these cases, you're dealing with a tribal elder. This is someone who comes with great history, great respect, and great cultural understanding. And sometimes the elder will be reluctant to work with the state for reasons which I think we can all understand. But I think the recognition by a state of tribal sovereignty, of the fact that these are two nation states, the state and the tribe, that are working together to build an agreement for the best possible outcomes you can have in a matter of elder abuse. And sometimes, go ahead, Margaret.
I wanted to include here that often the other side, like the state, will come up with a document where they're following their own policies and procedures. It's important that the tribe really identify what they really need and what works for them, and to be a part of, maybe even the tribe would do the initial draft, rather than just accepting something that the state or another party would present and just expect for the tribe to sign off on it. It's really important for the tribe to identify what the needs are and the particular culture and the issues involved, and to make sure that that is first and foremost in an agreement.
And what you will see in our MOU template is a preamble. In the preamble, it's also another opportunity for the tribes to discuss what is the value, what is the meaning of a tribal elder in their particular tribe, what is the cultural understanding, what a little bit of tribal history, whatever the tribe wants to include. But that first paragraph at the very first page of any of these agreements can be really important, not only the first time you look at the agreement, but for all the subsequent moments, because it holds a real value, I think, in describing tribal history, tribal culture, the value of elders in a particular tribe, and the way each tribe goes about taking care of elders. I think I love that paragraph because it's a wonderful opportunity for the states to also understand the individual tribe that they're working with and be able to ask questions to understand better their partner as they go forward in drafting an MOU. The other challenge, which is not only a current challenge, but probably a future challenge as well, are the jurisdictional complexities that can sometimes go with drafting these agreements. It's very important. I cannot stress this enough for APS workers to understand their state statute, number one. Number two, understand whether they're in a Public Law 280 state and what that means with regard to jurisdiction over states and tribes. In some cases, there may be the PL 280 state in which the state supposedly, the state has jurisdiction over certain things. But there may be agreements where the state and the tribe can work together on those particular issues. And although jurisdiction may finally come down to what might be state jurisdiction, there can be significant tribal input so that the tribal result can also be a part of what happens with that particular matter. And it's also important in the jurisdictional issues for each of for the state APS to know the tribal code. And if the tribal code of the tribe you're working with also has a section of a tribal elder protection code that may be part of that tribal code, or whether the pieces of what would be that type of elder code are in different places within the tribal code. Sometimes they're under the domestic law part. They could be in other parts of that code as well. But very important to know what that is, whether or not you're in a PL 280 state or not, and also to understand where there may be exceptions to 280 with the tribe or in the state that you're working. The other piece that's really important also in going forward in all of these is for APS to understand whether historically there has been an agreement in a state constitution that could be 100 years old, or in some other state piece of legislation where there is an agreement, essentially, a legislative resolution to say that the state of whatever is, dedicated to also working with all the tribal nations within its borders. I think it's something like that is really an important piece for everyone to know, because it sets the stage for what would be the continuing of a history that had already been agreed to and something they want to pursue. Next slide, please. Again, this sort of goes back to what we've been saying over and over again, but I cannot stress it enough. Clarifying the roles and responsibilities of each party to make the agreement work. The other piece is to continue to review to improve communication. I think this is probably true in everything we do in life. There can always be a better way of communicating to make sure that each party understands the other, and that there are no misunderstandings that could cause some harm to the older adult or the person causing the harm in the course of going through this particular matter. Sorry. The other thing that I think is important is it's not a one-way street. I think tribes want to support APS investigations, especially tribal nations that don't necessarily have the resources that maybe some of the larger tribes do. They don't have their own APS, but they want to support their older adult. They do that sometimes through their community responses and teams that may be part of that tribe. Very important for APS to understand what tools does the tribe have that it wants to implement in putting forward these MOUs, and what are the ways in which APS can be supportive of them. But also tribes want to support the APS investigation, because I think everyone wants the same outcome. We want the best outcome for that older adult. And the great thing about an MOU, as you continue to review it and keep working on it is that it fosters collaboration not only within the social services one is the one we've drafted right now, but that collaboration can spill over to lots of other ways. So continuing to define the roles and responsibilities and keep communication open between both parties may offer an opportunities for other collaboration in other areas of state and tribal work that can benefit not only just older adults as we focus on here today, but also in other areas where that would be important. And always remember that these MOUs, the idea is to enhance elder abuse and prevention and intervention and improve the outcome for tribal elders. Everything that is in these MOUs is really dedicated to preventing elder abuse, to raising the attention and the understanding of what elder abuse really is, and then working in all the possible ways to use prevention and intervention to improve the outcomes for tribal elders. Next slide, please. So this is our MOU template, and it is merely a tool. This is, please understand that this is not be all and end all. It is an outline of what could be used by tribes or states to be able to develop an MOU for social services, to be able to use it in the beginning of your work. The idea is to hopefully move things along a little bit more, maybe faster, but also with some clarity. It's not something you can take it. You can use whatever is going to be best for you and best for whoever you're working with, to be able to make sure that we've covered most of the bases. Our MOU template is going to be downloaded and accessible to tribes and state APS so that you can work together to build an MOU that will work for you in this particular area. We've been trying to, it's difficult to put all that together because it's not a firm document, but it's a dynamic document and it's a living document. I think the most important thing I can say about any MOU in any area is continue to figure out a timetable for review. If it's every 3 months for the first year, every 6 months in the years after that, but be able to continue to take a look what's included, what's not included, what are the things that we need to focus on better, how can we change what we need, how can we accept what's good, what would we like to change. I think it's so important to view the MOU as a dynamic document that is open to change and open to listening to both sides to see what can be improved. I think I'm going to turn it over to Peggy Jo now.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Margaret. Thank you, Judith, for sharing such great information on the MOU and the importance of it. And just like Judith said, this is a template right here that is going to be on our website, can be downloaded, can be used in any way. If you do want consultation on it and such like technical assistance on what should be put on it, please reach out to us. This has been a document for about a month now. Maybe no, like 2 months now. It got published right at the end of the holidays. So it's really been available to the workforce for like a month. And we've already are working with the tribe and a state who has this completed and now pushing it forward to both legal councils to review and make changes. And that was really done with little consultation from us. But we said we had the environment for them. We provided this template and they really went to work on it. So we're really excited to show what comes out of that. Maybe we can do a 2-part series to this webinar and kind of present on how that came about and how it's workable. So we're really excited to see that. Next slide. As you heard me talk about earlier, our resource center, that's where we do all of our technical assistance out of, is the NAEJI Resource Center, which is that Native American Elder Justice Initiative. please go to our website, which is NAEJI.org, and you'll see all of the things that we talked about today. You'll see that MOU. You'll see other resources, and there's a lot of talking pieces on what does elder abuse look like in Indian country, how to address financial exploitation in Indian country, how to talk with tribal elders when they've been a victim of abuse, some culturally relevant ways to address elder abuse in the field. So please take a look at our website so that you have an opportunity to see these resources. One of the other resources that is really important and useful on there is that we have our tribal and state hotlines on there, and it's an interactive map. So if you're in the state of Texas, you can hover over the state and it'll drop down several resources to go to if you have a suspected case of elder abuse, or if you're needing resources on elder abuse. It's tribal and state, and sometimes you may see that some of the tribes don't have an adult protective services program, but up there might say victim services, or it might even fall under child welfare. Just like we talked about the diverse nature of tribes, often the tribes might not label it the way that we see it in other states, like adult protective services. They might label it as elder care, and it might fall under the domestic violence group or program and projects. So you really have to look at those numbers. And if you're on there and you are from the state of Texas or whatever state that you are looking at, and you realize that we don't have a certain number, or you know that there's an organization that is a resource, please send us an email. We would love to get that on there. We always say that it is really hard to keep track of all of the culturally relevant and all of the resources that are out there from state to state. So we really rely on partners like you guys to provide that information to us, just to keep that that resource up to date. Another resource that we have on our website is modules. And so there are several modules. I think there's 9 modules right now, and they span from what is elder abuse in Indian country, to financial exploitation, to working within policy around elder abuse, within working in social services deliveries and methods, working in the behavioral health context. And how I like people to use those is, let's say that you are tasked to work maybe in an area that is more commonly close to a reservation or tribal lands, and so you're getting a lot of tribal elders on your caseload, and you're trying to work within these systems, but you don't have the competency. And I always tell people there's 574 federally recognized tribes. Judith, myself, and Margaret and Ron, we all work in this every day. We are not experts in all 574 federally recognized tribes. Nobody can be an expert in all of those cultures, all those laws, all those histories. And so what I tell people, just take that off, but also be mindful that you don't always have that competency to work with tribal nations. You do have to build that competency. And using those modules is a good way to build that. There's a cultural competency one. I always encourage people to use that one first, and then jump into the area in which you work in, whether that's policy or social services. But get that cultural sensitivity first, because what we hear most often is that partners are trying to work with tribal nations, and they really lack that cultural humility and sensitivity. And it really doesn't have to be that way. There's so many resources out there that can help with developing that cultural competency, while also remembering you cannot be an expert in a culture that's not yours, or in 574 federally recognized cultures. And so what works for us and our team is that when we go into working with tribal nations, we really will go into that with a commitment, with great intentions, and that we're not experts in their culture. Even though we might know things about their history, we might know things about their law and order, we are still not experts in their culture. So we really encourage you to come and look at our resources, because it really addresses all that. And I know that that's a common concern that I get from state and federal partners. Any non-tribal entity is the cultural component, or how to work within sovereignty. So please look at our website, because we have tons of resources. And if you don't have a resource on there that fits or meets your needs, please reach out to us, because we will provide that technical assistance around any area. And if we don't have that expertise in our organization, we probably know where to get it. So please reach out to us for any needs that you may have. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Ron, who runs the HBI, and I'll let him give you the initials and the breakdown for everything that he and his team does.
Thank you, Peggy, Joe. Yeah, my team works on the Healthy Brain Initiative, so that's through the CDC Foundation funding to work on that healthy brain work for American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian communities. We create materials that are appropriate for those communities, and our work really works hand in glove with the NAEJI work as well. We all know that those who have a history of being abused are more likely to suffer from some form of dementia, and also those that are suffering from some form of dementia are more likely to be victims of abuse, especially financial abuse. So our work is part of IA Squared as well, and really appreciate the opportunity to share that with you. And so please take a look at our website and find our resources as well. And I am going to go ahead and turn it right back to Peggy Jo.
Thank you, Ron. And even if you come to one of our sides of the house on the website, you'll be able to get to my stuff. If you end up on my stuff and are looking for Ron's, you can jump around on the website, which is really nice. One thing that I like to share about Ron's work and the resources that they have is they have something that's called 10 Ways Talking About Memory Change. And I always tell people that's one of my favorite documents because that is such a practical tool to bring into the field. And not only that is if you're not in the field, you're not in a professional manner, but maybe you're a caregiver, maybe you're a daughter, maybe you're a son, and you know or you see the signs of your mother or your family or your loved one that is showing signs of cognitive decline, and you need to start that conversation. And we know that sometimes it is very difficult to talk to your loved ones, maybe even your elders, about their memory declining. But that tool is a really good tool to use, about 10 ways of talking about memory change. So please look at that when you get a chance. Next slide. Here are those beautiful resources that I was telling you about. These are, like I said, I use these as talking pieces. Please feel free to go to our website. They are free to download, to print. One way I like to see them used is, so we know that most organizations have social media accounts. If you have a social media account and you need content, we know our social media people are constantly looking for content to share. Use these as talking pieces and content to share. Maybe you are not serving tribal elders specifically, and that's not in your work, but you know that it is, like Ron said, it crosses your work. Maybe you post one of that, post that one that says elder abuse in Indian country, and then write something about how your organization can support an elder who is currently or has gone through abuse. Or maybe just post, around financial exploitation in Indian country looks like this, and here's a fact sheet to it, and link it back to our website, link it back to our social media accounts. That's how I like to see these used. Sometimes I see them used as staff meetings. We all know that sometimes we're assigned every month to do training at staff meetings, and take one of these. You can take one of these and use it as a training for your staff meetings. There's so many ways that you can use our resources to bring awareness to the problem and to also build that competency on how do we serve Indigenous elders when they have been victim of abuse. Next slide. Here is our website. You can, again, learn more from our website. You can find Ron and I's projects on there. There are so many resources. Like I said, sometimes it gets a little bit overwhelming to look for them, especially because we might not label them how they are typically labeled, because we might change them due to the diverse nature and the culturally appropriate language to which the population it's for. So if you're looking for something and you're like, I just can't find it, we might have it. We just might have it labeled something different. And maybe we don't have it, but we probably, again, know where to find it. So please reach out to us. We'd love to work with you on addressing elder abuse in Indian country or elder abuse within tribal elders. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay. I want to thank our presenters today for sharing this information. I personally learned some things and found it very helpful. So thank you all very much for taking your time and sharing your expertise with us. Please feel free to use the contact information provided on the previous slide to learn more about their work and the resources that they are able to provide. We also encourage you all to follow the APS TARC through our social media pages shown here. Visit our website, apstarc.acl.gov, to access additional information and resources, and use the APS TARC TA mailbox, apstarc-ta@acl.hhs.gov, to contact us for assistance. We thank you for your time and attention to this webinar, and please have a great rest of your day.